I have been campaigning much like you since like very early days. I think I started becoming very vocal in April as it became very clear this wasn't just like a 2 weeks to flatten the curve. And, I'm sure we'll go into this as the conversation progresses, but I am a massive history nerd, and I'm someone that has a very keen interest in dictatorships, socialist policy, and history at large. So there was just a few things that just sent off red flags. And I was like, don't be hysterical. But just with the nature of, I was very invested with the US election as well. And seeing how we were coming into the 2020 election, I was very invested with what was going on in America. So
and to be clear, because you've spent time there, it's not just that you're some weirdo. You've spent time there and you actually like America and Americans. So it's relevant to you.
I'm very lucky. I've traveled to 65 countries. I've been to the United States 11 times. So traveling is my first love. It really is. And, I've seen a lot, and it's not to brag. It's just that's something that I've proactively chosen to do with my life. Whenever I can, I go overseas. So, that's just...
I need a big red pause button. I'm sorry. Someone is begging to get schooled in economics. Beatrice Nicholson, photography isn't actually producing anything of intrinsic value, though. Intrinsic value is a worthless concept. There is no such thing as intrinsic value. Value is in the eye of the beholder. I have paid for some of Carly's photographs, and I think I got a bargain. I think I paid far less than what they were worth. I have in business paid for photographs many times before in order to sell products or to do various things. Companies spend an absolute fortune on photographs. Are you saying that every single one of those people is wrong? I suggest, Beatrice, that your comprehension of where value comes from is wrong, and you need to actually understand the concept of perceived value as opposed to this nebulous idea of intrinsic value, which can never actually be demonstrated outside of perception. So anyway, there endeth the economic lesson. I'm sorry. Please continue.
Might I mention that this entire world that we live in...
Now my wife wants to get in on that as well.
I'm sorry, but whoever that person was, I paid Carly's invoice, and I would have paid more than 5 times what she charged us for. They were brilliant photos, and it was worth every cent.
There you go. All right, let's move on. So some people don't understand basic economics, and it really pisses me off.
Just on that, Beatrice, the entire world revolves around photography. My photos are what make businesses millions and millions of dollars. So unless you're telling me that those photos are now worthless, you wouldn't have the economic climate we have and the very capitalist society we have without photographers like me. So you're welcome.
Yeah.
Where were we?
No, we've all just piled on. Sorry, Beatrice. We'll all get off you one at a time now. We just had a big stacks on. Okay, so where we were up to, you were talking about the fact, I diverted you, actually. You were just mentioning that you were paying attention to the US election, and I diverted you, and you were talking about travel, the fact that you have seen a bit of the world. Al and I agree it is actually time for her to increase her prices for sure. And we've told her that, not before we paid the invoice. Obviously, we waited till after we'd paid our invoice. But yes, she needs to increase her prices. I would
if Victorians had money.
Yeah, well, that's right. So anyway, let's get her out of the diversion. You were kind of watching this 2-week lockdown became a long-term lockdown. The US election was coming up. Yeah, that's where we were up to before I diverted you.
100%. And I don't know how to play this cool. I'm a massive nerd. I really am. Like, I am someone that's heavily invested in YouTube consumption, book consumption, podcasts, audiobooks. Like, it's just me. And I think that's come about because as an entrepreneur, I predominantly am on my own most of the day. So I usually have something on for some kind of noise and not necessarily paying attention all the time, but, you absorb things, whether consciously or subconsciously. So anyway, so I was very invested in that. So there was a few things that started sort of setting off alarm bells. And, I already had a following of around 10,000 from my prior company. So those people knew me, they knew about me, they knew who I was. So I was talking to a crowd of my peers, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I started speaking up, and I was very vocal. And every time there was like a little bit of a red flag that sort of just made me very uncomfortable, I would touch on things, and I would correlate across to things that have happened in history. Not like everyone's very quick to jump to World War II and Hitler, but I always try and bring it over to something a little less egregious.
Yeah, a little bit less polarizing.
yeah, as soon as you go down that road, it's alarmist and you just lose people. So, but then I find that when I start speaking about recent dictatorships and recent socialist downfalls, people don't know what I'm talking about because very few people are not really across world affairs, which is fine, but you got to pick and choose your arguments. Anyway, so I had been very vocal about this. It's not a new thing for me. It just so happened when those videos went viral, all of a sudden I had this huge audience, like overnight, 40,000 people jumped on. And then people started making assertions as to who I was and going through my Instagram and trying to figure out who the hell is this chick. And so this all happened in 5 days. And I think that's really important to consider. 5 days of this, I put up the video, and then by day 5, I'm exiled to oblivion. And so what happened was I did a couple of news clips in the first 2 days, and people had been going through my social media and any prior conversations they'd had with me and were screenshotting things. Now, I'm not someone that struggles to articulate herself, and I do have some contentious points of view at times. And that just comes from my own world experience. I understand that to some people I might be a bit alien, but that's because my life has been anything other than simple and boring.
Average.
Yeah, so, I understand that. And, given up, I didn't grow up in Australia either. I've traveled a lot. There's a lot of people that understandably might not understand where I'm coming from. So people were screenshotting conversations they may have had with me in DMs or comments I had left. And this person was grabbing those screenshots. And then, you know how it is when there's no context. You can paint things to be whatever you like. And I think I was a racist. Then I was this person. Then I was this person. Like, you name a sledge, it was thrown at me.
Well, look, I found out just recently, apparently I'm a Nazi. I wasn't aware of that. I had to jump online and buy some merchandise because I literally don't have a single piece of Nazi paraphernalia in my home. But apparently that's what I am. So you're absolutely right. People just love to throw the labels around.
It's actually bizarre. As someone who is a keen, I shouldn't say enthusiast. That I don't know if that's a bad thing to say when we talk about these things, but be called a sorry.
Carly, can you pause and read this comment, please? Because you need to read this.
That speech from Carly, she spoke to thousands of self-employed people. I bawled my eyes out, and then finally someone had said everything I felt. Thank you, Eileen. Thank you. And just on that, I think that's why it achieved the virality that it did. It's not... People weren't sharing the story because it was me. They were sharing it because I had articulated how they were feeling. And I think that kind of authenticness flows out of you when you're not aware that there's an audience. It wasn't scripted. I wasn't on TV. It was just me in my bedroom, distressed, alone, frustrated, and it just fell out, And that is a level of authenticity that you will never see outside of these situations, because for the most part, we're very careful what we do. We're very careful what we say. And you certainly don't see that on the mainstream media. Everything is very carefully scripted. So I think that's why it achieved 40 million views, which to this, I'm sure it's more than that now because it's on every platform and people have screenshot it and saved it. And it's, God knows where it is. But I never planned that, put it that way. But so essentially what happened was after this person had attacked me and put her lens on it, shall we say. I like to talk in photographer puns and photographer analogies, so forgive me. But this person has a very different outlook on current affairs to myself. And so I'm mortal enemy number one. And I think it also doesn't help that I'm a young female who's articulate, smart, educated, and not ugly. I'm not going to say I'm not, but I'm not.
Yeah. This is the thing that blows my mind, and we saw it with you. I'm convinced that this is that you're another example, but we see it with people like Peter Credlin. We see it with people like Bindi Cole-Chocker. We see it with so many women who, if you had the right politics, you would be celebrated, right? And you would be celebrated because you're a strong, outspoken woman, right? But because your politics is wrong, suddenly you're not. You're persona non grata if you're lucky. In your case, you were a persona non grata until they finally went, oh, no, she's having an impact. We'd better actually actively try and tear her down. And there's
Absolutely.
a savagery. There's a level of savagery that seems to be directed at women in these sorts of moments that look, I've had some nasty stuff said about me when I spoke at the very first anti-lockdown protest on Anzac Day 2020. Yeah, I mean, my inbox was nasty for a while. but there's this added level of savagery directed at women. And I almost feel like it's because certain political groups believe they own women. Mm-hmm. They own that vote. You're supposed to support us because you're a woman. And there's this outrage that they have when a woman actually thinks for herself and comes to a different conclusion.
And I think that's the issue as well. Like I'm not easily swayed, and I step into my own power. I don't need someone to parrot for me. I don't need someone to make me feel comfortable. I have zero issue saying exactly how I think and feel. And that to most people can be quite off-putting. You know, it's not usual that you have someone that has a very healthy self-esteem. As a matter of fact, that's frowned upon these days. We need to have vulnerabilities. We need to feel oppressed or victimized and come from this place of, you know, like lifelong instability and crisis. That's not me. Sorry, I've got my shit together. I don't apologize for it.